Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to Coaching Unpacked. I'm going to put this on for reasons that will become apparent. This is actually a cowboy hat, but I feel I look like someone from the Elizabethan times. It is bonfire night, so I actually look like Guy Fawkes, don't I? It's a bit weird. For this, welcome back to Coaching Unpacked. I'm Chris Passy. It's very nice to see you. I'm here with my EduPulse colleague Adam Colbeck and coaching superstar Sarah Cottingham. How are you both?
All the better for seeing you wearing a Guy Fawkes hat.
It's not a Guy Fawkes hat. Look,
I mean, I'm eagerly awaiting an explanation as to why you're wearing a cowboy hat.
It's all going to make sense. It's all going to make sense. I'm going to have to do this like this. Sarah, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Again, yes, very happy to see you in a hat, and very happy to see you both. Adam both of you joining from school, which I think is majorly impressive.
We are, as you were just saying before we came live, logistical heroes. I don't know, there's a water cooler outside the door of the room that I'm in so that nobody comes in. The lengths we go to. Listen, it's great to have you two back, but it's great to have everybody back here for our second episode. Last episode, we were looking at all things to do with coaching, cause and effect. We had some great feedback, didn't we? I just want to thank everybody who listened and tuned in and shared. Yeah. Sarah, you flew over to America and hung out with some big old stars who had to tune in. Adam, you went to Tunisia and didn't share it with anyone there because you're on holiday. That would have done much good. But it's been received really well, and I'm so glad that we're back. But the reason why I should put you out your misery, the reason why I'm wearing a hat like this is because it doesn't quite fit, does it? Doesn't quite match. It doesn't quite match what I'm wearing. And it's really obvious. It's really obvious that here, dear listener and viewer, I'm still wearing this hat. There's a big mismatch here, isn't there, guys? Between
there is
what I'm wearing and what I'm meant to be doing. And I think that's going to be really big today, isn't it, Sarah?
It is, and I finally understood why you're wearing this hat, which you just pulled that out. We did not know what you were doing there, and we thought maybe you'd had a harder day than we've realised. Yeah, today our theme for today is as last time it was cause and effect, and today our theme is something that we've noticed as coaches is this idea of mismatch. So when we are trying to work out what to coach a teacher on, often it is something that feels mismatched in their teaching, something that is not driving learning in the way we think they want to. So it could be that they have a goal and that the actions they're taking don't seem to be matching the goal in that situation. It could be that some of the things that are driving their decisions don't seem to be matching their goal or their actions, or it could be that one of their actions doesn't seem to sit very, very well with another action that they're taking. So some kind of mismatch within a situation. And that usually triggers in the coach this sort of slight kind of jarring feeling of like something's not quite right here. So we just wanted to reenact a situation that a coaching conversation that Adam has had recently with one of his coachees, and this idea of mismatch came up. So we're going to dive straight in to this reenactment, and Chris is going to listen in and kind of probe us with some questions afterwards.
And I can't wait, because that means I'm going to be getting Adam the actor back, which after last time, I've got to say I'm excited. I've got my pen. I've got my book. I'm ready to think.
That's why we sent Sarah out to. Sarah went out to America to see if she could get me a film deal in Hollywood. And sadly, we're back.
I'm going to be listening, thinking, and jotting.
Right, so I'm going to hand over to Adam, who is going to be kind of coaching me, and I'm going to be playing the part of the coachee.
Okay, right. So for a bit of context then, so Sarah in this scenario is an ECT. She's done a reading lesson, and I've gone in to watch that reading lesson. And during the lesson, in the part of the lesson that I watched, she's reading aloud to a class of children. She's asking lots of little check for listening questions along the way to make sure that they're staying with her and taking in the content. But she's then got these really nice little discussion questions as well that are designed to kind of drive thinking a little bit more deeply. And the way that she sets that up was quite interesting to me when I was watching the lesson. So She would pose the question. She then would give the students 10 seconds to think, and then in pairs, partner A would tell partner B what they thought in response to the question, and partner B would have to write down partner A's thoughts at the same time. Then they'd swap roles, and then Sarah would cold call 2 or 3 times around the room. So that's the context around the scenario.
Nice.
And so we're going to dive into the coaching session from the point where I start to kind of probe a little bit around that particular part of the lesson, the actions that she took, the goal that she had, and the things that were driving the decisions that she was making. So, Sarah, can you tell me then a little bit about what you wanted to achieve with the discussion questions that you asked in the lesson? Like, what was your goal that you had when you asked them?
I wanted students to think really hard about some particular things in the text that involves them kind of making inferences. So, for example, I think I asked about what the current state of the mum and dad's relationship was, and how Cam felt about the new baby, and that all wasn't said in the text. It was something that they'd have to make inferences about. So it was getting them to think really hard, I think, about those things.
Okay, yeah. So what I'm hearing then is that your goal was to try and drive deeper thinking around some of these sort of bigger themes that were coming out across that chapter. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's it.
Fab. Okay. So how deep do you think their thinking was?
When I listened in, there were some students who were kind of thinking quite hard, but looking at the whiteboards where they were jotting down their partner's response, a lot of what was written on the whiteboards was really similar. So I don't know whether the pairs were just kind of copying each other.
Possibly. I mean, it's definitely possible, isn't it? I suppose. And I guess that setting up the question in that way, there's a chance that perhaps they were thinking the same thing. But I guess, yeah, we can't say for certain either way, really, because like you say, there's a chance that they would have been copying each other. If I read the questions back to you, can you tell me what you think about the extent of the thinking that you're trying to get them to do with the questions that are asked?
Extent of the thinking. I want them to. I think particularly for the questions around the state of the mum and dad's relationship and how Cam feels, I want them to go beyond what's in the text. So quite deep thinking at that point.
Okay, so it's definitely then deep thinking is definitely our goal. Can I read the questions back to you? And as a suggestion, as I'm reading them back, you have a think about the extent of or the depth of the thinking that you think would be required to answer the question that's posed. Okay, so here's what happened. So first one we had was, okay, why was Dad so annoyed? You've got 10 seconds to think. Partner A, tell partner B. And then after about 3 seconds, you interrupted that and you said, think about everything that's happened. Talk to your partner again. Go. Then there was a second question, which was, so what's the current state of mum and dad's relationship? Really, really lovely question, by the way. Like, just it requires so much like deeper analytical thinking. And again, you said, right, 10 seconds to think. Partner A, tell partner B. And then again, you left it about 3 seconds. And then you said, we talked about their relationship a lot and how it's not really great at this point in the text. Carry on. Then we got to, should we do one more?
Mm-hmm.
So then the third question was, you said, how do you think Cam feels about the new baby? And again, really, really lovely question to potentially drive that thinking, because it's not something that's immediately there and obvious in the text. It requires some connections from across it. So you asked that question, and then again you said 10 seconds to think. Partner A, tell partner B. Again, left it about 3 or 4 seconds, and then said, remember year 6 to use all the evidence from the text, and don't forget to look for his reactions. Carry on. Okay, what do you reckon? What are your reflections on that?
I interrupted them loads. You're right, and I can remember now that this was because I realised that the initial questions that I gave them were really quite hard. So I was trying to scaffold this thinking with those interruption questions, but actually, just hearing it back, I've realised it's like probably really confusing to be given a question and then given those prompts or additional questions as you're trying to think.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's a real positive to what you've tried to do there, because what I'm hearing from you is that the thing that drove your decision to put in those, and you've called them interrupting questions, but we'll call them scaffolding questions, because ultimately what you're trying to do there is scaffold their thinking, right? the thing that drove your decision to do that was a desire to reduce their cognitive load. You kind of realize actually there's too much for them to be thinking about here, or it feels like they're not able to do the depth of thinking that I want. So let me throw in this extra question to kind of scaffold that. So that feels to me like a really sensible decision driver. So you've got a goal there that makes perfect sense to drive thinking. Your decision around your action is being driven by the fact that you know you need to reduce the cognitive load and scaffold their thinking so that they can achieve the depth of thinking that you want. So my suggestion then would be, if we're happy that we've got the goal, then that's a really powerful goal, and we're happy that the concern around cognitive load is valid, can I show you a slightly adapted version of the actions that you took? And you tell me, as I'm going through, just consider to what extent is this action more or better aligned to the goal that you had. So the goal again is to drive that deep thinking. To what extent does my model achieve that goal? You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. What is the current state of mum and dad's relationship? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think about that. I'm going to ask you that question again. What is the current state of mum and dad's relationship? 30 seconds to think. I'll give them that 30 seconds. Okay, now I want everybody to jot down on your whiteboards anything significant that you just came up with in your thinking time. I want you to try and make sure that your jottings have got no more than 2 or 3 words each. You've got 30 seconds for those jottings. Go. I'll give them that 30 seconds. Okay, now, partner A, I want you to share your response to that question now to partner B, or with partner B. Partner B, while partner A is talking, your job is just to listen. You're not writing, you're not interrupting, you're just listening. Go. Okay, now, partner A, I want you to stop. Partner B, you've now got 10 seconds to add to your jottings with anything that partner A said that you think is really significant. Go. Okay, now I'm going to cold call. Okay, what do you think about that, Sarah?
So, yeah, I think those tweaks probably suit my goal a bit better. So I wanted to drive thought. I was giving 10 seconds of wait time. You gave 30, which is significantly longer. They had 30 seconds both to think and then to jot. And then they actually had separate time, 10 seconds to add to their jotting as well. So if I wanted them to think hard about, if my goal is for them to think really hard about that question, you've just given your actions would mean they'd have like over a minute and 3 kind of separate ways to like improve their thinking on it. So that, I think, yeah, if you're talking about a sort of matching the goal, then that seems to do a better job than what I did, I think.
Okay, and just as another reflection point, was there any time in my model where I was asking anybody to do 1 or 2 or more things simultaneously?
No, you have 30 seconds to think, so that's one thing. 30 seconds of jotting, that's another thing, separate. And then you've got listening to the partner, and then you've got separate time to jot something down, whereas I was doing listen and jot at the same time.
Absolutely. Okay, so just reflect back on that decision driver that we spoke about earlier, and we said that we felt that your decision driver was really, really valid. So you had this the thing that drove your decision to add in those scaffolding questions was a concern around cognitive load. You didn't want the students to be having to think about too many things at once. So to what extent have I addressed that decision driver then in the model that I showed?
Okay, so instead of giving kind of scaffolding questions at the same time that they're trying to think about stuff, you have separated out each step of the thinking or jotting. I suppose all of it is thinking, isn't it? Even if you're jotting, you're thinking. Even if you're listening, you're thinking. Even if you're adding to what you're saying to what you've written, you're thinking. But you've just separated it out so there's never a time where they're necessarily going to get cognitively overloaded because they're doing something different at each stage. and you
So
kind of
so does the
delineated it.
action that yeah, totally. So does the action that I modeled, does that still meet that same decision driver?
Yes, it manages cognitive load. Awesome. Yeah.
And what about the overall goal then? So if the overall goal was to drive thinking more deeply, to what extent does the model that I showed you achieve that goal even better than what you did?
So I think my questions were good, and I think you pointed this out as well. The questions were actually quite good in terms of driving thought towards the right things. It was the setup, the action that I put in place that was kind of overloading for the students, preventing them from potentially thinking hard. And I kind of got that sense from looking at the whiteboards and having very similar responses, and they weren't the best responses. I can see how the model you've just shown is setting them up to do that deeper thinking through kind of like different stages, different steps. So I think that better addresses that overall goal for the situation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the key point there is that by splitting it up so that you've got one thing happening at a time, students are able to attend to one thing at a time. And because they've only got one thing at a time to think about, they can then think about it in much more depth. If I give them 2 or 3 things to do at the same time, I'm spreading their attention more thinly. And you've said already that your goal was to drive thinking deeply. So, and we agreed that that was a really powerful goal. So can you see now that with that model, we've now got an action that serves the goal or meets the goal that you had in the first case in a better way, in a stronger way, in a more powerful way. And actually it's an action that aligns not just with the goal, but also with the decision drivers that you had in mind.
Yeah. It suits the goal to think deeply, and it provides the kind of scaffolding and support for those questions that's needed.
Fab. And cut.
Yes, that was brilliant. Oh, God, I love it when you two do this. It's very exciting. And I think it's quite a unique thing for people to experience at home because there's a lot of thinking and a lot of umming and a lot of cogitating. I've got to say, coming out of that, Adam, there's clearly a lot of prep work that goes into being a coach, not I did a coach, something that's actually thought through, because you hadn't just realized that there was a mismatch in your mental model of the situation and your ECT's mental model. You had to find that for yourself. So what was the point? Because not what was the point. What was the point that this happened? Because for me, what happened in that moment there was that you created the space for Sarah to think. You created the space for your ability to hold up her own practice to her. And short of doing videos, which are an outstanding way of coaching, if we're looking at mental models and this way of doing it, it's like it's holding a mirror up to her own practice and going, "That's what you did," and the realization of like, I could have done that way better. I've really missed a trick there. So, Adam, can you talk us through your preparation and kind of what you did and how other people might be able to get their hands on it?
I think, firstly, I think that it's probably worth pointing out that we wanted to deliberately choose something this week that is really abstract. So quite often, I think some coaching can end up focusing on the observable techniques and the things that you can coach on in a more kind of concrete way. But really, what we're trying to get at here is this was a coaching session which was fundamentally about thinking. It was about the students thinking. And obviously my coaching then centered on the teachers thinking, which almost sort of means we're thinking about thinking, which feels really, really meta and really complex and quite complicated. But that was kind of deliberate, I suppose. I think to then sort of try to get to your question. To my mind, I can see what I would like the teacher to do or what I would do in that teacher's place. But I think when coaching becomes about I need to get this teacher to teach more like me, I don't think that's sustainable. Mm-hmm. I think we've got to hold up this sort of ideal of what good teaching is, and go and make sure we've got a shared model of that and a shared understanding of that as a whole school as well. And then go, right, we're all collectively aiming for this thing. So it's not about, okay, I think you should do this because that's what I would do, and try and have a go at it next time. It's about trying to get to this ideal. Now, if that's your aim, to try and sort of always aim for this ideal, the only place you can start surely is with the teacher's current thinking, because it's the thinking that's driving the actions that they're taking. So that, to my mind, that's why it is so important to have to first of all start with what the teacher's thinking, but also to be able to kind of surface and represent that and get a shared understanding between coach and teacher of what that teacher was thinking. Because until you've got that, I don't really think you can move forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, like, I've just made loads of notes, despite the fact that we've practiced it. I'm still like learning stuff from it, even the second time around. I
Brilliant.
think what so Adam actually, like, that's a reenactment of an actual coaching conversation that Adam had with his ECT, and I think what's really skillful about the way he's coaching is that, for me, the action the model that he presented to me is a logical action that I should take, because he's really got me to understand what my goal was in that situation to drive thought. Then he's held up a mirror, just like Chris said, where he's like, well, this is what you did. How well did it drive thought? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm interrupting their thinking. Like, no, that's really confusing. So he's held up that mirror to me. He could have just said, like, Sarah, the questions that you gave interrupted their thinking. You know, perhaps that would have had the same effect, perhaps. But holding up that mirror was useful for me. It was a bit confronting, but it was useful. I've got a good relationship with Adam. So I'm like, yeah, there's a problem. So I've identified that my action isn't aligned with my goal. And then Adam knows me. Adam knows, that my only suggestion there was like, well, don't do the scaffolding questions. I don't have the knowledge to know how to improve my actions. So he presents me with this model, and he's asking me specifically, what am I doing, Sarah, that's better aligned to your goal? So it's still my goal. It's still me. It's still ownership by me. Adam's just presenting me with an opportunity to look at what might, like, a possible future that might be better, and like forcing me gently to analyze it and really think about, well, what is it? And I've taken away some really clear things. I couldn't help but take away some really clear things from that. I've taken away that I want to do it the way that Adam said. So I've taken away the action, but I've taken away some important stuff as well. I've taken away that if I want to drive thought, I'm not going to get them to do two things at once anymore. If it's hard enough to do one thing at a time. So Adam's really got me to think about, like carefully thinking about how I set up these activities so they're not doing more than one thing at once. And he's got me thinking about the power of giving more wait time as well, because I was only giving 10 seconds and Adam's giving 30 seconds. Like, you can see a world where the next part of our conversation is us rehearsing this, me getting comfortable with waiting for that 30 seconds, me getting comfortable with giving the instructions for this task, etc. So you can see how this would naturally lead on. So I think Adam identifying that misalignment, but making sure I also identified the misalignment. I own my goal. I realized that what I was doing does not align to it, is so empowering for a teacher. Adam's not imposing his thinking on me. He's leading me to the logical conclusion that this is a better way to teach.
I think one of the issues that I just heard was maybe the language you were using, because for me, the word driving is it feels linear. If you're pushing something forward, so if you're driving thought, you're accelerating, you're moving quickly, and actually what you need to do was stop and dig down. You needed to develop thought. You needed to, there's probably some other words, but you were saying if your goal is to drive thought, then yeah, you stick your foot on the gas pedal and vroom, and that's what you did. You drove the thought. You drove it hard. You drove it fast. You drove it like you stole it, to steal a phrase from a musical mentor of mine, Mr. Simon Shaw. You drove it like you stole it. You smashed through. You're like, think about this, do this, write this down. Are we all thinking? We're all thinking. We're driving thought. Driving really quickly. And actually, what Adam got you to do was to slow down, to stop driving the thought, to identify the thought, and then develop it before moving on. And I think sometimes, it's not necessarily the criticism of what we're doing or thinking, but, there are some people out there who are going, are we over-codifying things? Are we naming things that we don't need to be named? But I do think that there is something to say about the responsibility of language and what language everyone is using, because I think driving thought in the end is what you were doing. It was just too fast.
I think on that point, actually, there was two things that came to mind. The first one is that like a lot of I suspect that people listening to that might have picked up on the fact that at some points it was quite challenging in terms of like some of the language that I was using with Sarah. But I think Sarah made a great point that it is her goal and her decision drivers. So therefore, if she's telling me, well, this was the goal that I had, and I'm going, yeah, I think that's a great goal, like super powerful. She's going, and this was the concern that I had that was driving the decisions that I made. I'm going, that's totally valid, brilliant. And then she's going, so this is the action that I took. Then I can then go, so to what extent does that action meet that goal and serve that decision driver then? Because she's already got we've got 2/3 of absolute agreement. So she's, if you really want to simplify it down, she can be 2/3 very confident in what she's doing, because we agree on the goal, we agree on the decision driver. We can then afford to be a little bit more challenging around the action and poke and keep poking until we're absolutely satisfied. And it's not because that's not the only thing that we're getting at. So it's not that Sarah feels, hopefully anyway, that she picked the wrong thing. It's, I picked the right goal, I picked the right decision driver. I can serve those two things better if I tweak the action. So that's the first thing. And secondly, Chris, you mentioned about video and about the use of video. I absolutely think that you can coach like this with the aid of video as well, because and actually that serves the purpose of reducing cognitive load for the teacher even further, because we don't have to do this thing of like, do you remember what you did? Shall I show you what you did? We can watch what you did, but what you did again isn't our focus. Our focus is why, or really what we're trying to get is, why did you do that thing, and what goal was that thing trying to serve? So by having the action on the screen in front of us, that doesn't pull away from the fact that we can still really focus in on the decision driver, the goal, and ultimately what the overall learning problem was.
Yeah, I think it's really important to say, sorry, Sarah, to interrupt you live, because I think it's really key to say that for anybody driving and listening to this, and they might not be watching it, which means you missed my hat. Very sad. You have to watch us back to see the hat. Is that on our website, and we'll put a link in this description, we're actually going to have a copy of the mental model and the mapping you used to run this coaching session. Is that right, Sarah?
Yeah. So we're quite into mapping mental models, which if the listener hasn't heard about that, we suspect that we can figure out kind of we can suspect that we can like display people's decision making if we understand their goals, what happened, so what their actions were, what their effects were, and what their decision drivers, so the things that were driving their decision. So as Adam kind of said there, I had this goal to get students to think really deeply, think really hard, and my decision driver to kind of interrupt with these questions was that I wanted to manage their cognitive load. So I had quite a good goal and good decision driver, both of them quite worthy, but the actions I was taking weren't really serving the goal as well as Adam kind of modelled to us. So we'll map that out because it's a bit easier to display, and we'll give you a kind of link to where you can access that. I just want to say for coaches out there that I don't coach ECTs. ECTs in the UK are early career teachers, so they're reasonably new, although also got a lot of lessons under their belt most of the time. But if you're thinking how would I make that more challenging for a teacher who perhaps needs a bit more of a push? Well, if we're thinking in terms of mental models, then the action that Adam showed me, and the things that he showed me around like increasing wait time and things like that. Another really cool question to ask your coachee is like, when would you do it differently to what I've shown you? Under what conditions would you use less wait time, more wait time? When would you maybe not get them to talk to their partner about it, or would you always do that? So it's about figuring out what we might call like the boundary conditions of the action, and that can kind of really test that coachee's mental model and their understanding of like how to use techniques as well, just to add that extra challenge.
I think that's brilliant. Adam, have you got any closing thoughts for our second episode?
I think everything that Sarah just said there is so important around around adapting your coaching for someone who has got more experience. I think that this way of coaching is really adaptable. When we put up the actual mapped mental model, which as you say, people you'll definitely be able to get. What we'll do as well is we'll put on the mental model that shows my model of what I was watching, and we'll also map on Sarah's model of what she did onto that same document, and we'll do it in different colors so you can really clearly see the comparison of where the mismatch happened. So, you know, our goal, what we both perceive to be the goal will be the same. What we both perceive to be the decision drivers will be the same, but there'll be that mismatch in what we thought about the actions being taken. So I would have taken a different action, Sarah took the action that she took, and so you'll be able to see that that's by using that mapping, that was how I was able to go, right, okay, that's the bit that I want to kind of really drive at. I think the other thing just to finish with is that the more experienced the teacher that you're working with, I think probably, and very generally speaking, the more willing to be wrong you have to be as the coach. So if it might well be a case that you go, okay, that's where I want to get at, because I think that this would have been this would have been an action that would have served the goal better than what the teacher actually did. But actually, if the teacher can give you a really good and clear explanation and reason as to why actually their goal was far better served with what they did than what you would have done, or that they give you some context about that class or about those students or even about that room that kind of change how you interpret that, you've absolutely got to go with it. So don't ever feel, coaches listening, don't ever feel that you've kind of, I've already made my decision, I've got to keep down this line. If they give you something that makes you think, I've got that wrong, then absolutely say that, because that's where that partnership, where it certainly starts to feel like far more of a partnership. And that is, utterly fundamental. It's got to feel that you've got that partnership together.
I wonder whether we can set a challenge for ourselves then, Coaching Unpacked team. Next episode, I wonder whether we do a snippet of a coaching conversation that's with a more experienced teacher perhaps and a less experienced teacher, same stuff, but how a coach might handle that differently. Because I had a bit of a what if question from one of our listeners around handling different levels of expertise. I wonder if we could challenge ourselves to do that.
And we can
not
also
asked you about this before, so
no, but we can also challenge Adam to not be kicked out of his school, because if you're watching this, his lights have just gone off. It's some kind of weird disco thing because of your microphone. You look like you got a blue light on. Don't shine that anywhere you're not meant to. Good grief. Yeah, let's do that. If anybody please wants to get in touch, we are on X, Coaching Unpacked. You'll be able to find us and send in your what ifs. I just want to say thank you for this episode, because I think as a accidental coach in training, which is what I think these things are, I better get a certificate out of this, guys. I like a certificate. My key takeaway from this is that it's really important that the coach is creating space for the teachers to think. And ironically, given the example of and the lesson you were just coaching through, we have to do unto our teachers as we expect them to do unto their students. And for me, that's a massive takeaway from today, that you aren't overburdening your coachees with too much cognitive overload and giving them the space to think so they can actually reflect on their practice brilliantly. It's great. So thank you. And I guess I'll add them in much better lighting next time. And if you aren't tuning in watching video, you miss out on the cowboy hat, which now looks like a Guy Fawkes hat. So this won't go out on Bonfire Night, but if you're celebrating Bonfire Night, as so many people do, I don't know, way into December, happy Bonfire Night. I hope it goes well. Next time.
See you soon.
Take care.
Put the lights back on.